I was pretty content focused in my approach, but I think that Buffer has a few other things going for it. What we do a lot of instead is more like sharing as we're building. Who wants to start the week jumping into a bunch of meetings? When we have people go into different roles or move into different roles depending on the company, it just changes team dynamics.
Hello and welcome to Behind Growth, an experimental podcast where amazing guests like Hailley share some tips and tricks on what's behind great projects and startups, including failures and lessons learned from the past. So today we have Hailley, head of communications and content at Buffer, one of the most amazing social media tools that is used by millions and millions of people worldwide. And actually, a fun fact is that I've been following Buffer values for a long time. Probably since 2013 or something like that. So yeah, not only a social media tool, but an inspiration tool for a lot of people. So Hailley is also a co-host at Make Work Work, a podcast on around the work and including career growth, creative growth, work, and striving to improve. So yeah, Hailley, welcome. And how are you feeling today?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. It's always really fun to meet people who have known about Buffer for so long. I feel like there are quite a few of us on the team that knew about Buffer back then as well, and we're following along with Buffer and Buffer's values and cultures before joining too. So I'm also in that camp. So it's fun to meet another person who's been following the Buffer journey for such a long time.
Yeah, it is. And actually, I applied to a couple of roles, I believe, probably, yeah, back in the day, like 2013 or 14. I applied. I didn't join the team, as you know. But yeah, it was definitely a cool process. And I remember that I was kind of a buffer ambassador to everyone that I knew on the marketing side.
Oh,
And
I
it
love
was
that.
not actually about the product itself. It was mostly about the culture and transparency and all that. And yeah, up to today, you guys still keep the same values or similar values. Yeah, and I appreciate
Yeah.
a lot the transparency because it helps a lot other projects grow and all that. So it's a win for us that you guys that you all share so many things and so many interesting content there. So yeah, I wanted to start probably by talking about a bit on content and PR. And I was still moving from the PR side and working just mainly with journalists and external comms to now have a broader scope and now leading content and the comms.
Yeah, it was interesting because, so for context, I started at Buffer 7 years ago. I was Buffer's first public relations hire. They had never had anyone else doing PR. It had previously just been one of the co founders, which makes sense. I feel like that happens a lot with startups. And then I took on PR, really solely focused on PR for maybe 5 years. And then in the past 2 years, maybe 2.5, I've been more focused on broader comms. And then I ended up taking over the content team as well. And I think for me, it was very natural because I had done content before joining Buffer. So this is an area I had experience in, but also my style of public relations is very content focused. So we can get into that more, but essentially, like, I've seen success with public relations where we create super strong original content, and then we actually get reporters that reach out to us or reporters that mention us because of that. So like the state of remote work is a really good example. There's a lot of stuff on Buffer's blog that we write because I'm not really sure if anyone is writing about it yet. So we publish it, and then in a couple of months or maybe even a year, this always happens, I get reporters that reach out to me and they're like, I'm writing a story, I came across your piece, now I want to interview you. So my style of PR was already really content focused. So I think it was a pretty natural transition. And then on the comms side, because Buffer is so transparent, a lot of like our broader comms just sort of end up coming through PR, or I'm like pulling things internally from the company and taking them externally as well. And there's like some internal comms there too. So it felt like a very natural fit, possibly just because of how I approach PR and how Buffer is as a company, which is maybe a little different than most companies.
Yeah, yeah, definitely different. And yeah, coming from that's probably the most interesting approach for PR and that's what I believe is probably the right approach to be super content focused, and PR is just another mean of distribution of your content, and it's not just because yeah, particularly coming from a lot of Web3 related projects where a lot of things around hype and getting journalists to pick up your story because you are just bragging about it more than others and not really valuable. I think that approach is definitely much more sustainable in the long term, and
Yeah.
it was definitely one interesting hack that Phrases I did in the past is building the relationship with journalists based on inviting them to build content with you. So, for instance, we
Mm,
invited like chief editors to build content like a meetup, a roundtable, and inviting them to our own content
yeah.
and having them as moderators, as like people that don't have a particular like interest in our product growth by itself, but can have interest in the topics that we want to discuss. So definitely an interesting approach that worked. And do you think that is why it worked so well for Buffer?
Because we were content focused.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of things. I mean, I was pretty content focused in my approach, but I think that Buffer has a few other things going for it. I mean, the transparency is very unusual. Like for people who might not know, Buffer's like our entire revenue is on our website. You can find it. You can find all of our salaries. Like there's a webpage called buffer.com/salaries where you can see what I make, what my boss makes, what everyone that I work with makes. And so I think that there's also an element to like Buffer being such a forward thinking company and doing things genuinely against the grain while still being successful. That was also, like the media was really interested in this. And we still, to this day, so we've been publishing our salaries online for 10 years now. And I probably still get reporters like, I mean, definitely at least once a month, but I would almost say maybe even like once a week reaching out to me for a quote on this. And it's like, it's because we were first to, and like we've been, but it's a little strange that we've been doing it for 10 years compared to a lot of others. So I think there are a lot of different factors for why it worked for Buffer. And like, definitely one of them is just that we do things very against the grain, and you kind of have to be. I think the thing is, like, no one paid attention to Buffer when it was really small and they were doing weird things like publishing metrics. It didn't really matter when it was only a couple of people. But when you start looking at like a few $1 million in revenue and like, okay, AR and MRR are going up, then people were like, oh, now this is strange because you're doing it while you're successful. So I think there's an element of that too. Like Buffer got a lot of traction and grew, but then kept these principles, kept this culture. And it was just kind of like, oh, that's a little bit more of taking that like indie builder style, but then
Exactly.
doing it
Yeah.
in a bigger company. That was unusual too.
Yeah,
It's
because
still
I was thinking
unusual.
about that. Yeah, a lot of indie makers use that to build in public and all that, and that's what makes
Yes.
other indie makers really interested in them, and they build a community around that. But when you are like mainstream and you leave the indie aside and you become mainstream, that's much more challenging. Particularly, I know that for you guys like are more, you don't have a ton of stakeholders and you didn't raise like a ton of funding rounds and all that, so that's probably easier to manage having
Yes.
that context, and it's also different from a ton of other startups. So yeah, and I understand that it is challenging, but probably could be much more challenged if you had a more complex structure. And actually, one cool thing that I found, I'm a bit like a data geek, and I was looking at like experiments that Buffer team did and all that, and I found also a super cool website that is public, so I probably can share it. It's like data.buffer.com,
Oh,
and you have like
yeah.
super cool experiments. I'm not sure why you stopped in
Yeah.
2021, but that's amazing. It's like product wise, you have like churn experiments, onboarding. It's amazing. And
Yeah.
actually, I follow you all in social, like Brandon and Joe and most of the team. And I don't remember seeing that a lot, but it's amazing. Like you have product experiments and results and how did it went live. And but I didn't see that super spread on the com. So I wanted to ask you and try to get some feedback on that. Is like, what is the role on content strategy in the overall growth mindset in the company? So product and content teams work together and do experimentation together, or it's mostly on the product side? How does it work on Buffer
For product experimentation in particular.
and content? So basically, do you guys do experiments on the content side to try to understand what might be the next direction of product and feed that information to product, or the experimentation growth side is mostly only focused on product and not on the content side?
Yeah, that's a good one. So we do a lot of, I would say, what we do a lot of instead is more like sharing as we're building and getting feedback as we're building. So not necessarily like experimentation and testing, but more so like, hey, this is what we've done this a couple times. Like, this is what AI looks like in Buffer right now before we launch it. What do you think? Would you do something differently? Or like, hey, we're thinking of doing YouTube next. Would you want to use that in Buffer? And that goes really well for us from like the product and comms side, both because we get to like build excitement with our community of something that we're building, but then also we get really great feedback. So we do still do that. I think there's a little bit less of content necessarily dictating what product would build next, but we have like our product marketing managers do a ton of surveys. We get like a ton of user feedback. So we have a lot of data around what do our users want because we survey them pretty regularly. And we just have like surveys that pop up in the product to say like, what do you want to see in Buffer and like, you know, our NPS score and things like that. And so we can take that and then say, hey, people are asking for Mastodon. We should probably build Mastodon, which we did. And it went super well for us, right? And it's like, okay, well, we listened to the data there.
And then, and it also works the other side around. So you then can validate content that you can build. So basically, if you have a ton of people asking for Mastodon, you can build content around that. And you know that you all have your audience is ready to share that and use that to expand brand awareness and all that, because you already know that they are asking for it. So it works both sides on product, but also on content. And that's super cool. And we're talking about like audiences, the product users and all that. And what about community? So I know that at least I was there in a couple of community experience, I would say. So I remember you guys had, you had a Slack channel. You have a Discord right now.
Yep. I wasn't sure if you were in the Discord. Yeah, we are the Discord.
Yeah, I'm in Discord. I'm not super active, but I'm in the Discord. So, but I had this perception of, okay, during like the initial phase of Buffer, community was super strong. This is only my impression, so probably super wrong, but let me know. Then you started being more product led. I believe like your growth started being more like feature wise and what we want to build next with some acquisitions and all that. I remember, I think you acquired Reply, I think, or
yes, we acquired. It was initially called Respondly.
Oh, Respondly,
and then we relaunched it as Respond, and then later rebranded it to Reply.
Reply, yes. Okay. So you did a couple of acquisitions to move more towards product-led growth, and then I start seeing like again activity picking up on at least on Twitter more. Like initially, you were like everyone of the team was on Twitter, super active. You had buffer shots and all that. Then it stopped for a bit, I believe, and then I'm feeling that it's picking up again. So what led you to this like different decisions of, okay, let's focus more on product, and then, okay, let's focus again on community? I'm super curious about that.
I love that. This is such a fantastic question because, like, first of all, very impressed with how closely you followed and like that you're able to see this history from the outside. No, I love it because even from the inside, you know, like we have this history of like, okay, what's going on here? And, you know, you're pretty spot on like that's exactly what happened. Is that early days we were very focused on community. We actually had a community team. We had a number of people on community, like at its largest, it was 4 people. We had people in community like move to different roles. So we're a small company. I think that's important to note because a lot of our competitors are a lot bigger than us, like several hundred people, several thousand people. We're not even 80 people right now. I think we will be. We have like a couple roles that we're in the process of hiring for. So we hover around 80 or the low 80s. We're a really small team. So when we have people go into different roles or move into different roles, depending on the company, it just changes team dynamics. We've had a lot of that. So like one of our community managers, I'm remembering, was like one of them became our social media manager. The person who was leading community ended up moving and like studying HR and becoming like moving to our people team. Okay. And then we also had someone from our community team move onto content, growth marketing, and then later like product marketing as well. So it's just kind of like when you have a small team, sometimes you move people around to just depending on what's going on and what we're experimenting with. But then I think for community, like I do think you're spot on. It was definitely more of a everyone is all in. This is a super big project initially. And over time, it got deprioritized. And, looking back, we're like, okay, that was a mistake and we shouldn't have done that. And so that's why you're seeing this renewed effort and intention into community. But we didn't just want to relaunch community exactly the way that we did it last time, because also there was a reason that we stopped doing it. It was taking a lot of effort. And it wasn't necessarily like it was hard to measure or hard to track. And now we know, okay, there's just inherent value in cultivating community. Those people are incredible buffer supporters, but then also they can be people that are beta testers. So that's one of the things that the community is really strong at now in Discord that you're a member of. So we have all these channels for beta testers. And then we have people who are beta testing, like we had people testing Mastodon before we launched it. We have people beta testing the AI, which is really useful. We've had people beta testing products for Meta, which is very cool. So it can be really useful that way. And, we want the community to grow and anyone can be a part of it, but it's helpful to have that focus of like, okay, these are people who can be buffer champions and who can really test out the product and give us like super, like what we need is great beta feedback. And we have found several people that are fantastic at doing that. So I think it's just ebbs and flows. Strategy changed over time. Teams grow and evolve. I won't say that we've always made the right decisions because we definitely haven't, but there have been a number of decisions made with community where we're like, yeah, shouldn't have done that, but we always learn. And then ultimately, like now, I think we're in a good spot. I'm very happy that we're in Discord, and I think it's the right platform for us right now.
Really? Why Discord and not Slack, for instance, to manage the community? I'm super curious on that.
Discord has more of that like vibe that we're going for with our community of like, again, indie makers, gamers, people in tech versus Slack, which can be quite buttoned up and professional. And you're looking at your work messages alongside the buffer community messages. So it's a little bit more formal. We wanted to be pretty informal. And I think Discord is quite good at that.
Nice. Because I tend to agree with you that Discord is much more relaxed and much more fun to use than Slack, and a lot of people use Slack nowadays for like professional things. But it's fun because this is like a completely different platform or idea than it was like 4 years ago. Like Slack now feels like Microsoft Word or something like that. It's like no one knew. Everyone is moving to Discord is like the new cool kid in the block, and it's super interesting. Have you ever tried other platforms like more private platforms like Telegram or WhatsApp for your community-led efforts?
We haven't tried it for Buffer. I don't think that those. I don't know. Those platforms haven't gained a lot of traction just within the Buffer team, and that's the other thing to keep in mind is because we want community to be something that the whole team is involved in. We do want to use platforms where the team is active. So, I mean, WhatsApp we probably would have quite a few people, but yeah, I'm not personally in a bunch of communities on WhatsApp, so I can't say I would be able to vouch for them in those conversations that we're having.
Nice. Yeah, and you mentioned that you in your tech stack you are we're using more Discord than Slack nowadays internally.
We're not internally. We're still using Slack internally, but I think we just have a lot of people at Buffer who are also in Discord channels, which is cool. So
I feel like everyone is going to Discord, particularly like company that are mostly community-led, that have mostly community-led growth are moving toward Discord. Even their internal Slack is moving to Discord and leading Slack. So it's cool to know. You're mentioning on a lot of people within the Buffer team were moving to other different teams, and you have that horizontal transition between like different roles within the same company, and that's super interesting. And I know that you're super passionate about like personal growth and productivity as well with the podcast that you have. So and I'm a listener as well. What kind of interesting and productivity and personal growth tips that you have tried that had most impact, particularly in this move from like more PR focused to like having kids and having even broader role and all that? What was the personal trick to keep that going?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I feel like there are so many, and this is something that I talk about a lot on Make Work Work, so I'm glad you mentioned it. But for that transition in particular, it's helpful to like hone in on one. So going from being an individual contributor to now being like a team lead and having a lot more stuff on the go and just being involved in bigger decisions and more strategy conversations, it has been a lot. So I would say there are a couple of things. I immediately was in a lot of meetings. Like when I was interviewing too, you're in interviews all day, and that can be very challenging. I prefer to work asynchronously, so it was really challenging at first. And then when you're onboarding people, you also want to make sure that you're like closely connected with them, especially depending on whether or not someone has worked remotely before, just making sure that they're getting a good introduction to the company. So one of the things that I do that has been really helpful to me is just like working in blocks. So, okay, I'm going to take this amount of space. Maybe it's 2 hours in the morning, and I'm going to do my deep work here. Or I'm going to do my writing here that I need to do. And then in the afternoon, when I know that my focus is not as good and I'm in between meetings and I only have 30 minutes, is when I'm going to review, because I also do a lot of reviewing. I'm reviewing like all of the blog posts that are going out on the blog, social posts. I'm reviewing like product marketing campaigns. Like there's a lot of stuff where I just need to jump in, and I actually don't know how long it's going to take me, but I need to jump in and review it. So working in blocks and just categorizing my tasks. I use Todoist, so I'll just categorize things as like, this is deep work, this is going to take longer, or sometimes I'll assign like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes to a task. Or this is review work, and I'll do it all together. Like yesterday, I had, I think, 5 things to review, and I just took a 30-minute chunk of time. I was like, I'm doing all my reviews right now. I'm reviewing all of these guest author blog posts. I'm reviewing all of these like outlines for things just right now, because your brain is in the same mode. So I never
Yeah.
used to do that. I would just kind of get my tasks done in whatever order worked for me. And now I have to batch my work so that I'm doing similar kinds of work at the same times. So that has been a big one for me. I'm not always great at it, but I'm trying. Another one is
Sure.
delegating. Oh, sorry, you go.
No, no, I was gonna say I feel you. Yeah, it definitely when you are leading teams meetings is the thing that you need to get
Yeah.
on track as soon as possible. One thing that works really well for me in meetings wise is I think no meeting days. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
literally saying everyone that I don't have meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays or any other 2 days of the week, and people book meetings or invite me to meetings only on the rest of the days. And I know that in those two
Yeah.
days I will be able to be super focused. So I'm not the most social person ever. So I get really tired if I'm like one entire day in meetings as well. So I try to have buffers between meetings. To breathe and to get a debrief
Yeah.
and think and go for a walk and all that. So meetings is definitely a big challenge. And one thing that I feel that works really well is I think no meeting days, and people know about that.
I love that. I block off Mondays for deep work, like just in my calendar. You can't book it. Because for the same reason. Also, because who wants to start the week jumping into a bunch of meetings if you have a bunch of stuff you want to get done that week? As someone who's very productivity focused, it's more motivational for me to start the week and get a couple of big things done and be like, wow, this week's already a success. And then whatever I get done in between meetings the rest of the days is just a bonus and is fantastic too. But like I've already gotten some key things done on Mondays. So I try to do that. And I also blocked off my mornings. I'm very much a morning person. And if I start the day with mornings, like it'll be fun because I love talking to people, but then I'm just not in the best state of mind later in the day. So I also block off my calendar 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. so that no one can book meetings for me those days as well. So yeah, I agree with that. I kind of do the opposite though. Instead of having breaks in between meetings, I just want them all as close together as possible, just power through them so that I can get stuff done before and after. Because I find if I have too many 30-minute gaps, I can't like get enough done in between. And as an extrovert, I don't really mind being in 3 hours. That doesn't happen very much anymore, thank goodness. But like if I were in three
Yeah,
hours of back-to-back meetings, I would be fine. I would just need a break afterwards. So it like
I won't be fine. I won't be
yeah,
fine.
that's the thing is I feel
That's
like with a lot of this productivity stuff, you just have to know yourself to be able to make those decisions for yourself. If you don't know if I didn't know this about myself, maybe I would block off Thursdays and it wouldn't feel as good, or maybe I would not block off my mornings, block off my afternoons and never get the right kind of work done. So you just have to know this about yourself to be able to make those specific decisions.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, one thing that tell me one thing that didn't work well for you. And like one thing that everyone is talking about and didn't work for you at all.
I have so many. Actually, one that I've just recently decided just is not working for me is I feel like everyone says like work out first thing in the morning, like get your exercise in first thing in the morning. And I have been doing that for months now. For months now, I've been working out first thing in the morning, like 5 a.m. I'm working out a couple days a week.
5
It is,
a.m. at club?
yeah, no, like, no, I'm 5 a.m. I'm somewhere else. So like I'm leaving my house at like 4:40. It's ridiculous. And so I've been doing that for a few months now. And I'm just like, this isn't working for me. I love working out. That's great. But I actually have decided like I really enjoy spending my mornings drinking tea. I write morning pages, which is a part of like the artist's way. It's a system I really love. I reflect. I like plan my day out in Notion. There's a lot of things that I do. And I'm definitely not doing that at 4 a.m. So I'm just waking up, getting out the door, getting to the gym and to get there for class on time. And that's just not working for me. And I feel like everyone's like, yeah, the early, like wake up first thing in the morning, like work out first thing and it works for you. Yeah, it just doesn't work for me. So that's a recent one. I gave it
Okay.
a real solid effort. I've been doing that for like 3 or 4 months now.
Okay, that's yeah, it's fair. People usually say that you need 21 days doing something
Yeah.
to get the habit. So you did it 3 times that or 4 times that. So
I
definitely you tried.
I gave it a solid try. I think the other one, like if you look at a lot of productivity advice, people are always telling you about self-help books to read all the time or productivity books to read all the time. And I just learned I can't read those books all the time. I definitely think there's value in reading those books. But if I read those books every day, because I do read every day, or if I read those books every week, I get like depressed because you start to think that you're not doing enough
Exactly.
things
Yeah.
because they throw so many strategies and frameworks at you. You don't have time to actually implement them into your routine. So I read a lot of books, but like I read a lot of fiction and like, like fantasy books. That's where I'm at. And I will read self-help or self-improvement or like business books, but I try and do fewer so that I don't feel overwhelmed by the amount of information and the amount of change I feel I need to make after reading it. So that's another one.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that one because that happened to me like 6 months ago. That I was reading like I don't know 10 technical books,
Oh
and
my
I was
gosh.
getting my head is like getting everywhere. I need to start reading fiction, but the challenge is okay. What fiction will I read if I want to learn more? And it's like your mind is asking you, okay, I really want to learn more, but I'm getting tired of this topic. So one thing that I did and is still reading technical stuff, but from completely different areas. Like if you're talking about
Mm,
I don't know marketing and you are reading like a ton of marketing related books or business related books, then I start reading about data analytics. So
yeah.
it's still technical, but it's different, and it feels like you are yes, particularly when you are leading, you have different areas that you can improve and want to improve. Obviously, your personal level as well, but professional side. And I was feeling that okay, I feel that I already understand what's happening in this field, so I have this other that I can improve. So let me take a look at what's happening on this side. And so, still technical, but different topics helped me a lot to not feel overwhelmed about what's happening. And yeah, this
Yeah.
is kind of topics that you talk a lot on. Make work, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We talk a lot about like personal systems and processes and the things that we're doing to get better, what's working, what's not working.
And what is the greatest hack to bring the podcast up to the top?
I don't know. So we haven't been super focused on getting to the top of the charts, honestly. We build Make Work Work because we want to, because we have those conversations all the time and we want to record it. So we haven't been super focused on getting to the top of the charts. We have made it to the top of several charts, which is very cool. Um, but it wasn't intentional. But I think if I had to break down like what's working for us with the podcast, it would be consistency in terms like we've been doing this for years now, community as well. Like we are in touch with a lot of our regular listeners pretty regularly. We talk to them. There's like an open policy. We get feedback. We get ideas for episodes. We get like top concerns from people. And then quality also. I think that because we don't publish the podcast, like we aim for monthly, because we don't publish the podcast weekly, for example, we're not pushing ourselves. We don't have to compromise on quality. And so there's also now a lot of content we're creating around episodes, and we can just elevate the whole show with that instead of having to compromise on anything for speed. So I think those are some of the things that have worked for us.
Okay, last one, and just to wrap up, what were like the biggest experiments that you had at Buffer, and you had like super high hopes, and in the end it failed completely?
Tell me one. I don't have a lot of context on like the product ones or any of the data ones. So the blog that you mentioned, which I do want to mention, that one was fully maintained by a couple of people at Buffer on our data team. So I think that's why it has slowly pittered off, because that one wasn't like officially one that the content team was owning or anything. It was just like some people at Buffer.
It is great. It has great content.
It is so good though. Yeah, I think so. A couple of things, let's say from comms, that haven't worked out. One for me is 2 years ago, I was on the comms team at Buffer. I was working super closely with our chief of staff, with our CEO. We were working on internal comms. We're trying to make everything like just function better within Buffer. You know, we're a fully remote team. We have people all over the world. We have teams that are in a bunch of different tools. We're like, let's work better and have better internal transparency, because right now the engineering team's in Jira. I'm not going to lie, every time I log into Jira, I'm like, thank God I know this one page and what this page does. I don't know what any other pages do. I can't find anything in there. So like in theory, it's transparent, but it's not discoverable. And we've had a lot of discussions about how that is an element of transparency, is you should just be able to find something. So one of the projects that we took on was actually creating like a whole project management tool for ourselves in Notion in a series of databases, setting it up, making it so that we could have just greater team transparency. You'd be able to see what anyone was working on, any team was working on. A lot of hours went into this, a lot of experimentation. I was coaching people one-on-one on the team. I was like creating videos. We got buy-in from all the team leads. No one uses that today. Like this was a multi-month project that like me and the chief of staff were like super focused on. It just completely flopped. Personally, I'm super glad that I did it, because I learned a lot about Notion, and that was like my and you know, everyone has an entry point to when you get addicted to something, and I'm definitely addicted to Notion, and that's what happened. That's when it happened. Now I know.
That's a win.
Yeah, it was a win, but we were trying way too much to change existing habits for the company. And even though our motivation was good for greater transparency, the problem wasn't big enough that people weren't willing to make that level of like system change to do those things differently. So I think there's other ways that we found to improve internal transparency a little bit better. Like we use a tool called Threads. We just make sure that people are writing more updates. We share more openly. We try and move a lot of stuff into Dropbox Paper, which is a tool that everyone opens naturally. And so there are other solutions to that problem, but that solution of let's build a custom system of databases and our own project management tool was a complete flop, and it's okay. I had a lot of fun trying to do that.
And you probably learned the lesson, because you mentioned before that now for the community you decided to use a platform that everyone already uses and not for. So definitely
there's some good lessons.
Exactly. Hailley, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So, awesome. See you next time. Bye-bye.